Alright, I am back with another video, and today we're just doing a regular build. This is not really a build request or a part of any particular series. We're kind of just getting back into normalcy. So, but the idea with this build is like when I was making the Shadowheart Origin build, and I was making, you know, like a Life Cleric, and like I was also making like a Trickery Cleric with Eldritch Blast and all that good stuff, I was like, I really actually want to build a Light Cleric, because when I made the, you know, good variation of Shadowheart, which was a Life Cleric, because that was the appropriate domain, I was like, yeah, but I would have loved to have built a Light Cleric for this. So we're building a Light Cleric today, just to kind of satisfy my urge, I guess. Not that urge, not the one that's involved with the game, usually. I'm not a murderer. That's exactly what a murderer would say. Okay, so, never mind. Off on a tangent, but so I was like, okay, what can I do with a Light Cleric that is going to be interesting? And I was kind of like fumbling around and I was like, wait a minute, Light Cleric has, at level 8, the ability Potent Cantrip, which adds, or Potent Spellcasting I should say, but it adds your Wisdom modifier to the damage of your cantrips. Now I was like, oh wait, could I make an Eldritch Blaster that uses that feature, maybe stack it with Agonizing Blast, and get a really powerful Eldritch Blast? Unfortunately, no. That doesn't work. Potent Spellcasting from the level 8 Cleric only works with Cleric cantrips that deal damage, and there's only two. Sacred Flame and Produce Flame. Now, it kind of got me thinking, I'm like, okay, maybe I could do a build around Produce Flame, but what exactly makes that cantrip interesting? I mean, basically, what the cantrip does is, you create a small ball of light in your hand, and then you can choose to throw it, or just hold onto it as a source of light. When you throw it, it deals 1d8 fire damage. And I know what you're thinking, I'm like, well, why would you ever want to use this? Why would you not just use Firebolt, which does 1d10 fire damage? And I'll answer that question by saying, Produce Flame is blue. It's blue. It makes blue fire. It has a cool effect. Okay, yes, technically, take Spell Sniper at level 4, get Firebolt on a Cleric. Yes, that's better, but this is cooler. And I'll show you exactly how powerful we can make this single cantrip be. Now, obviously, obviously, while this build is kind of designed to make Produce Flame as powerful as possible, we're still playing a Light Cleric at the end of the day, which means you are going to be a full spellcaster with access to things like Fireball, Scorching Ray, and since we're also playing as a Tiefling, you're going to get things like Flame Blade and such like that. The original concept I had for this build was to actually even throw on 2 levels of Paladin to, you know, kind of get like Searing Smite and such like that, and you could play around with that sort of thing, but the final build ended up being something a bit different because I had to contend with some issues that came about from my equipment choices, and you'll see what I mean as I get into it. And this has probably been the longest intro to a video ever, so let's just get into the build. I apologise. Let's just get into it. So, of course, we're going to be starting things off as a Cleric because we want Produce Flame as soon as possible. Now, yes, you can play a, I believe it's a Asmodeus Tiefling, and they do get Produce Flame as a racial cantrip, in which case you could just go with that, but I wanted this build to be for anyone who wants to use the build. They don't have to play as Tiefling, but if you maybe wanted to get Produce Flame and then maybe play a Charisma-based caster that uses, like, Draconic Sorcerer levels, you could go with that. But be warned that your Produce Flame cantrip gained from the Asmodeus Tiefling still uses Wisdom, unlike the other racial abilities that would use Charisma otherwise. So just be prepared with that. But we're gonna be grabbing Produce Flame here, which I've already explained. But we can also grab a couple of other cantrips. So we've got Guidance and Thaumaturgy here because they are our 2 conversational skills, and our Charisma is actually going to be pretty high for this build. We're actually going to be maxing it out. So you are going to get a lot of mileage out of things like Guidance and Thaumaturgy for dialogue checks. As already stated, we're going to be a Light Domain Cleric. That is going to give us the Light Cantrip, which we do not need because Produce Flame is what we're going to be using. And we also get things like Burning Hands and Fairy Fire, which is quite nice, and the subclass feature Warding Flare, allowing us to use our reaction to impose disadvantage on someone attacking us for the cost of our reaction, which is pretty good. Our deity, now, I felt like the deity that worked quite well for this is Lathander. I mean, he is like all about like light and, you know, like rebirth and beginnings, and, you know, his thing is more radiant damage, whereas we're kind of doing more fire damage. But you'll see that just by nature of being a cleric, the radiant stuff is kind of splashed in anyway. So in my head, I think Lathander works, but if there's someone else who you think would work better, let me know. People usually do comment about my choice of deity when I make clerics. Now, stats are going to look a bit strange, but I will explain. Wisdom and Charisma are both at 16. These are going to be super important for buffing up our cantrip damage, so we want these as high as we can. Constitution is at a 14 because it's at a happy middle ground and I didn't want any stats at an odd number. Intelligence just to round it out, so I feel like we're quite a good overall face for the party. We have a lot of the mental skills needed to kind of engage in all forms of dialogue and exploration. And then lastly, Strength and Dexterity are both at 8. Strength we don't need, but Dexterity is going to get bumped up through the Gloves of Dexterity, and you'll see why that is important later. So let's keep going. So while you can kind of take these multi-class dips whenever you want, we have a couple of very small dips we need to do to kind of make this build work the way I want it to. And again, this isn't really an optimized build, this is just a sort of, hey, this is a thing you can do build. Again, that's kind of what my channel is more about. It's less like, you know, trying to make something that is as powerful as possible. We're just trying to make something that I think is cool and is fun. And as such, we're going to need to take a couple of multi-class dips that are a bit strange, but you'll see what I mean. First up, Fighter. This is only so we have access to simple and martial weapons, and shields if you so desire, although that will be a bit detrimental if you go with it later, you'll see what I mean. But we do get a fighting style from this, and take whatever you like, it really doesn't matter. I'm going to say Great Weapon Fighting just because my particular choice of weapon is going to be two-handed, so this makes sense. So we might as well grab this here. And then, next up, there's one more little dip I would like to take, and that is into Monk. Now, we are not here for anything in particular necessarily from Monk, but we are going to get things like Unarmored Defense, which we want because we are wearing clothing with this build. You also do get to make a little bonus Unarmed Strike, an extra 1d4 damage, so you do get that little bit of extra damage per turn if you would like, and you do get things like Flurry of Blows as well. We only have 2 key points at this point, but, you know, it's something that we can use, and again, but the main thing we're here for is that any of our weapons that we are proficient with that are not two-handed or, you know, being wielded in... basically, if they have the two-handed property, they won't work as monk weapons, but if we're wielding a versatile weapon in two hands, it will work with monk weapons. So, you'll see what I mean. But long story short, it's going to allow us to use our dexterity for the attack and damage of our monk weapons, which is any weapon we're proficient in, hence the fighter dip, meaning that now we can use anything that isn't a big, heavy two-handed weapon, which is super good. So, and since we're going to have super high dexterity, thanks to the gloves of dexterity, we're going to have access to a lot of weapons. I'm articulating myself very poorly in this video. My apologies. Right. Now, in actuality, you could go to level 2 of Fighter for Action Surge if you want. You could take a few more levels in Monk, maybe even go all the way to level 3 with it, and get like Way of the 4 Elements for some extra fire shenanigans. But I'm going to keep this build relatively simple and just kind of stick to Cleric, just because I want those higher level spell slots and some of the higher level spells for big damage, because I think it's going to be fun to do that. However, build this however you like. You might find that you might even want to do what I said earlier and not even use Cleric, but I wanted to build a Light Cleric today, so... here we are. Right, as for Cleric level 2 features, as a Light Cleric, we're going to be able to get Radiance of the Dawn, which is just a nice big radiant damage attack, but deals 2d10 plus 2 radiant damage. Pretty good. And we also do get to prepare our spells, which I didn't do at first level, but whatever. And I'm just going to suggest bring the standard Cleric kit. I like Guiding Bolt, I like Sanctuary, I like the healing spells of Cure Wounds and Healing Word, and the last spell can be whatever you like. I've heard good things about Inflict Wounds recently, and if you're the person that commented about this, I think it was yesterday, just so you know, you've put this on my mind, so let's pick it up. At level 3 of Cleric, we're going to be able to get some extra spells from our Light Domain, that being Flaming Sphere, which you wouldn't normally be able to get, so that's quite nice, and Scorching Ray, which is just one of our more common high damage, you know, fire spells. Really, really good, might as well have it. And we also do get to pick some extra prepared spells. It's entirely up to you what you want to take. Again, usually the standard Cleric fare is pretty good. Aid is always useful. Hold Person can be quite strong. Enhanced Ability can be really helpful. Take whatever you like. The kind of, since we're mainly focusing on the cantrip, The spells you kind of take at each level don't really affect the effectiveness of the build overall. Your main thing is going to be your fire spells that you're getting from Light Domain anyway, so for the rest of it, it's kind of just a bonus. Take whatever you like. And at Cleric level 4 we are going to be getting our first feat, and we are just going to take an ability score improvement to bump up our wisdom to 18. This is just going to give us more power with our cantrip overall, so we definitely want to pick it up. We also do get another cantrip at this level, and we might as well take Sacred Flame just so we have another source of damage from a cantrip, because obviously without running Elemental Adept Fire, we do run the risk of running into something that is resistant to fire, and our whole strategy just kind of... So we might as well have a decent source of radiant damage as a cantrip as well. Like I say, take whatever spell you like, and we've already done the feat. Next up, at Cleric level 5, we're going to be getting our Destroy Undead feature, as always, allowing our turn undead to deal radiant damage. We're also going to get 2 Light Domain spells, that being Daylight, just allowing us to have an item or a sphere in the area emit daylight, basically just brightening up an area, or, you know, dealing damage to things that might have sunlight sensitivity, such as vampires or other Underdark races. So, it's there. Not the best, but there's one boss fight where it'll be pretty useful. And then, obviously, we get Fireball, the big motherfucking damage thing. I don't know how many different ways I can describe Fireball. You chuck it at an enemy and it deals a buttload of fire damage. What else can I say? You guys all know what Fireball is. Oh, I'm slowly losing my mind. Next up at Cleric level 6, we are going to be getting our improved Warding Flare as our subclass feature, now allowing us to extend that protection not just to ourselves, but to our allies as well, imposing disadvantage on attack rolls against them, which is pretty nice. Although I have to say, in my combat testing, which you'll see in the footage later at the end of this video, I activated improved Warding Flare a ton of times, and it never worked. Like, every time the attack just still went through, so, I mean... I'm sure it's not bugged or anything, I just had really bad luck, but I did think it was quite funny, so I thought I'd point it out. At Cleric level 7, we are going to get access to level 4 spells. This means we have access to things like Wall of Fire and Guardian of Faith, thanks to our, you know, Light Domain. But we also have access to level 4 spells as well, and the game's kind of just picked random ones for me. Again, take whatever you like, it really doesn't matter for this build. And then finally, at Cleric level 8, we do get that subclass feature I was talking about, Potent Spellcasting. Your gold grants you even more intense power. You can add your Wisdom modifier to the damage you deal with Cleric cantrips. That very specific wording of Cleric cantrips is what decimated the original Eldritch Blast build idea, but hey ho, this is still really, really nice for what we're trying to do here, and is why we've come this far. We also do get another feat with this level, and of course, we're just going to bump up that Wisdom to 20 to max it out, giving us the maximum amount of damage possible on our Produce Flame cantrip. Now, moving into the next levels, like I said, at this point, you can kind of go whichever direction you like. Take a level of Fighter for Action Surge. Take Monk levels for those features. Hell, even go for a Fighter subclass like Champion if you maybe do want to do some sort of critical build. But I think, again, just because for the sake of simplicity, I do fancy keeping it just, you know, in Cleric, because we're going to get some more things for this build which I quite like, such as our Light Domain spells, Flame Strike, and Destructive Wave. Flame Strike is awesome. In my opinion, at least in this game, it's a better version of Fireball. It's better than its D&D tabletop counterpart, because it deals more damage, but it also splits the damage between Fire and Radiant, giving you a bit more maneuverability around, you know, enemy resistances, and it is really, really cool to use. Just boom, massive pillar of fire and light coming down from the heavens and just wrecking shit. It's so fun. Even more unique is Destructive Wave. Now, if you've never had a chance to use this spell, that's not surprising. The only way to get it is through either the Light Domain or the Tempest Domain subclasses for Cleric. It's not available on any regular spell list. And this kind of has a similar deal as Flame Strike, but instead of fire, you're dealing thunder damage, but there's also an option to do thunder and necrotic damage as well. And the big difference, whereas with Light Domain, you kind of choose an area and it and it hits the area, similar to Fireball, Destructive Wave erupts around you, similar to something like Thunder Wave, but instead it's all around you, and it does a lot of damage. It's really, really cool, and I personally really like this ability. So yeah, I felt like, just getting these kind of unique spells felt a bit nicer than just going for the typical, action surge or whatever. You know what I mean? I'm just trying to make unique builds here. Right, and again, of course, you can mess around with your spells, take whatever you like. Again, I'd kind of focus on the healing stuff, because it's kind of what Cleric is good at, but you're going to be more offensive, and the domain spells are all we really care about. And then finally, at Cleric level 10, if you decide to go this far, you are going to get Divine Intervention, which is going to allow you to call on your God's aid. To do a couple of things, you can either do a massive attack, you can get a legendary weapon, which is probably what I would choose, because that weapon is actually quite good. And then there's also a thing like, treat everyone as if they just had a long rest, so you can kind of get that last second wind that you need maybe to beat a tough opponent, perhaps even the final boss. Or, you could just get a ton of camp supplies, which is lame. The caveat being that you can only use this once per character, but most of you already know that. But the whole trick is that you can obviously have multiple characters, respec, level up to Cleric, and use this ability multiple times, especially if you want multiple copies of that weapon. I will do a build around that someday, but kind of making a build that is kind of locked behind level 10, I don't know, but we'll see. But yeah, we get Divine Intervention at this level, which is, all in all, pretty good. We do get another cantrip like Resistance, and again, you can prepare your spells as you like. And that is the build. Overall, what you're getting with this is you are, at the end of the day, you're kind of a Pyromancer. You have all your big fire spells that you would want, including some extra bonus stuff as well. You have the ability to use pretty much any type of weapon that's not two-handed quite effectively. Both melee and ranged. So, you have a lot of versatility in combat. And of course, you still have all the usual Cleric stick, like healing spells, aid, spirit guardians, all that good stuff. You can't really go wrong when you build purely Cleric, mostly, because, you're just going to get all the good stuff that Cleric gets anyway. And Light Domain is honestly probably tied with Tempest for being my favourite subclass. You just get so many cool things with these. I love the Radiant Fire kind of mix. But let's get into the star of the show, the thing I mainly built this build around, and that is Produce Flame. This is cool. If you've never used this, so it's a blue flame, and then you cast it, and you're holding it in your hand. Look, and it actually stays like that. You just have a blue flaming hand. The roleplay implications of this are sick. I can see this person, again, since we built a tiefling, maybe they have some connection to one of the kind of deeper layers of hell, where the fire burns so hot that it ignites blue, because, when fire gets hot enough, that happens, and as such, they have this incredible power over flame, which they wouldn't normally have, and maybe to turn themselves away from, their dark heritage of being, connected to a deep pit of, the Nine Hells, they turn to religion and as such gain the favour of Lathander and follow his, kind of teachings of justice and shit like that. I don't know. Whatever Lathander does. This isn't officially a deity build for Lathander, but it kind of is. You know what I mean. And also, I'll show you what happens when you throw the spell, because the way the spell works, right, so it costs it's a little bit strange. I'll go into it in a bit more detail. Produce Flame, you can hold the flame in your hand until your next long rest, which is fine. You can dismiss it at any time at the cost of an action, but you can also throw it. Now, the way this cantrip works is in battle, and you'll see in the combat footage, if the same turn you cast Produce Flame, you can throw it without spending an action. But if you don't throw it on that turn, you will have to spend an action to do it on subsequent turns. So it basically just will work like a regular cantrip, you just have to click an extra button. But if you want to bank it for some reason, you can. And you can also just throw it as soon as you enter combat if you cast it out of combat. So it's just something I thought I'd point out. But we can see what happens when we throw it. Hiya! It does kind of turn red once it leaves your body, but we're going to pretend we didn't see that. Right, let's get into the equipment. Now, this is going to look very strange. Ignore all of this here, I was kind of testing out fashion. But yeah, the stats on this build already are a bit strange, but you'll see what I mean as we get into it. So, first up we have the Birthright Hat, giving us a +2 to our Charisma up to 22. Pretty good. I mean, this is just going to bolster up stuff that I'll get to in a minute. The Cloak of Protection, just for a bit of extra AC. The Potent Robe. Your cantrips deal additional damage equal to your Charisma modifier. This is why we wanted our Charisma so gosh darn high, because it is going to allow us to do extra damage with our cantrips. Even though they're mainly cast with Wisdom, they're going to get a massive bonus from Charisma as well, so it's worth picking this up, and this is why I wanted those monk levels. Also, the Gloves of Dexterity, since this build is multi-ability score dependent because we need levels in Wisdom and Charisma to make it the most effective, this allows us to dump Dexterity and get the points back from this instead of having to put points into it. Obviously, you get this kind of like just towards like the later parts of Act 1, so while you still get it fairly early on, it's definitely going to be a kind of respec when you get it situation. Use your better judgment. And finally, the Evasive Shoes, just for a bit of extra armor class, and the fact that they're, like, not armor, they're just regular boots, so they work with an armored defense. Heck, we even have just 22 AC standing here right now because of all the different buffs we've managed to stack from our armor, as you can see, so you're going to be pretty hard to hit overall. As for our accessories, we have the Necklace of Elemental Augmentation. When one of your cantrips deals acid, cold, fire, lightning or thunder damage, you add your spellcasting modifier to the damage dealt, so this is going to add our wisdom or even our wisdom to the damage rolls a second time. So, just so you know, that is being stacked 4 times. We get our wisdom modifier from our potent spellcasting, we get our charisma modifier from our potent cantrip from the potent robe, and we're also getting our wisdom modifier again from the necklace of elemental augmentation. So, I guess it's 3 times, but you understand what I'm talking about. It's going to get pretty powerful. In the combat testing that I did, Produce Flame pretty much did 30 damage each time it was cast on average, with slight variances here and there. The lowest I saw the damage die roll was a 26, and the highest I believe was like a 34. You'll see it in the combat footage because I actually showed the log this time. So with all this combined, Produce Flame is on par with a fully spec'd out Eldritch Blast, which I think is super cool. We also have the Ring of Arcane Synergy, because we are going to be using a weapon with this build. I just had to drop it on the floor for reasons I'll get to in a minute. But basically, after we use Produce Flame, we can add our spellcasting modifier, which would be our Wisdom, to the attack and damage roll, rolls, or just the damage roll actually, of our next weapon attack. So when we actually have we can, if we decide to make a sword attack, which we might want to do, we can do that. This is kind of a leftover from when this was originally a paladin build, so feel free to swap these kind of rings out if you like for something else. Speaking of, the Ring of Elemental Infusion. When we deal, in our case, fire damage using a spell or cantrip, we can add an extra 1d4 of that element to our next weapon attack. So stacking these two together just means that after we cast Produce Flame, we can use a powerful fire weapon attack, which I think is pretty nice, but again, you might want to swap these around. Now, as for our main weapon, I had to drop it on the floor because I accidentally cast Daylight on it, and the Daylight effect persisted into the character creation menu and made it look really weird. So we can pick it up now. And the effect went away when I picked it up. No, it didn't. It's come back. So you can see how we kind of look a bit funky, like we're telling a ghost story by flashlight or something. But anyways, this is Duke Ravengard's Longsword. It comes with a lot of cool benefits, actually. When you kill an enemy, you gain temporary hit points equal to your charisma modifier. It has a +1 enchantment, and it also allows you to use Commander's Strike once per short rest, which is kind of nice, but it also gives you a flat Charisma +2 with no restrictions. I want to do a Warlock Pact of the Blade build using this weapon and the Birthright and just see how high you can actually make your Charisma in this game, but we'll see. So, with this, right, we're going to have a total of 20 Charisma and 20 Wisdom, meaning that our Produce Flame is going to do a ton of damage, but also any cantrip we cast. Hell, Sacred Flame would also do quite well. And if you maybe did pick up the Spell Sniper feat at some point, you could have grabbed maybe Firebolt, and that could have also done a ton of damage. Although it wouldn't have gotten the buff from Potent Spellcasting, so again, you may be looking to make a Draconic Sorcerer with that type of build. But overall, this combination is going to actually make us really effective in combat with our Produce Flame, like I said. But again, also with our 12 intelligence plus these 2 stats, we're going to be really effective as the face of the party, and we're not going to be really suffering in any of our other stats either, so it's quite nice. And finally, we have the Darkfire Shortbow. If you're not concentrating on something like Spirit Guardians, this can actually be really, really good, as Haste would actually allow you to cast 2 Produce Flames per turn, which would do, obviously, a lot more damage. If we're getting that 30 average, that's, 60 fire damage per turn, which is insane, so, maybe want to pick this one up. yeah, I don't think there's anything else to go over, so that is the build. Like I said, you'll see in the combat footage that I actually show the damage numbers on the log, that this cantrip is doing a lot of damage. Again, maybe if I applied this kind of strategy to something like Eldritch Blast or Firebolt, that would technically be doing more, but that's not what we're here to do. We're here to throw blue fireballs because it looks fucking awesome. I will point out, though, the combat footage you're obviously seeing is against an enemy that is resistant to a lot of damage types, fire in particular. So while the damage numbers you will see actually popping up above the enemy are quite low, that is because the very, very high damage numbers that we were getting were sliced in half, and you'll see in the combat log. But overall, we're going to be doing a ton of damage, as you can see. And again, I just wanted to create something new, and I don't think I've actually seen anybody really focus on this cantrip. So I thought, you know what, I'm going to show off its potential and how cool it actually is, both visually and aesthetically, especially when you kind of get the character looking right, which I feel like I've done here. Kind of the blue tiefling motif really spoke to me. As for end of video, you know, kind of updates and whatever, a couple of things. Number one, my final origin build, the Dark Urge, the bloodied one. Holy crap! That video is quickly becoming extremely popular. It is by far the most popular origin build I've done, and the other origin builds were like the most popular videos I've done in a while. So the fact that that one shot up so quick is insane. Thank you so much. Also, the Shadowheart video and the unique kind of experimental presentation that went for was very well received, so I appreciate that as well. And finally, I currently have a poll going on this channel's community tab to see what this weekend's live stream is going to be. I believe I mentioned this in a previous video, I'm not too sure, but whatever. Long story short, it's either going to be a continuation of my Honor Mode live streams, or where or a live stream where we theorycraft builds for the channel for future videos, where we all just sit down in a chat in front of the wiki and we collaborate together, and you kind of get to see my build making process kind of in action, but it's a collaborative effort and we all work together and kind of come up with stuff. So yeah, I mean, that sounds like it's going to be fun. It's also like a 70-30 split leading towards the theory crafting stream, so that's most likely what's going to happen. I don't have an exact date for the stream yet. It'll either be Saturday or Sunday, but if you want to get in on that action, be sure to keep an eye on the community tab and the upcoming live notification thing to know when it's going to happen. I really hope to see a lot of you guys there, so because, well, it directly affects the future of the channel, so, you know. And yeah, I don't think there's really anything else to get into. I mean, it's 2024 now, so Happy New Year to you all. As I said, I hope your, new year is better than the last. And yeah, I don't think there's anything else left to go over. I've kind of been a bit rambly in this video, so perhaps I'll stop it short now. The combat footage is a bit longer for this one, so I imagine it's still playing, so I'll leave you with that for now. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.
Come a little closer.